Coming up on UGTV, Board of Commission meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call. Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Markley. Here. Walters. Here. Gilbert. Bynum. Here. Burrows.
Here.
Townsend. Here. McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia. Here. Alvey.
Here. This evening, our invocation is being given by Reverend Ken Netling of Faith Lutheran Church. Please stand and remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, all. Let's pray. We gather in your name, Lord, as we do the business of this great county and town, Kansas City, Kansas. And we give thanks for the opportunity for service. Especially, Lord, we pray for our first responders, those who are out protecting us right now. And so protect them and give wisdom and discernment and all that these elected officials need to do the business of the city and to follow your great command. That is that we love and care for one another. All of this we pray in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Netling. I'd ask the clerk, are there any revisions to tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, under the tax status report, COZ number 3183-2014, taxes have been paid.
Thank you. All right. Clerk, you may proceed.
We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor David Alvey, Commissioner Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1, Commissioner Tom Burrows, at-large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, Commissioner Brian McKiernan, District 2, Commissioner Ann McGee, District 3, Commissioner Harold Johnson Jr., District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Jim Walters, District 7, and Commissioner Jane Philbrook, District 8, is unable to be here. As each petition is called this evening, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express their views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before this commission, the commission has three options. Number one, it can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 6 votes. Number two, it can override the Planning Commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. And number three, it can return the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration, together with the statement specifying the reasons for the referral back to the Planning Commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the Planning and Zoning agenda. Items on the consent agenda have received a unanimous vote of recommendation by the Planning Commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or staff, then the Planning Commission's recommendation on all items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of agenda items on the consent agenda, and I will have completed the list. The mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to stand up and request that an item be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted upon separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We would remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we would appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone to please turn them off or switch to non-audio so you will not disturb the meeting. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 3 minutes to state your views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and city for the record. The mayor and commission are required to disclose contacts with proponents or opponents on any item on the planning and zoning agenda. I will ask if any member of the commission wish to disclose any contact with proponent or opponents on any item on the agenda.
All right, does the commissioners have any items to disclose? Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you. I've had contact with proponents and opponents of SP-2019-30.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you, Mayor. I've had contact with proponents and opponents of SP-2019-16 since our last meeting on that matter.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you, Mayor. I have had contact from proponents of 2019-27 and 2019-30, both proponents and opponents on the second.
Thank you. Commissioner Bynum?
I have had contact with proponents of special use permit 2019-16. I've had contact with both proponents and opponents of 2019-30 and proponents and opponents of 2018-54.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I've had contact with proponents of SP 219-16.
Thank you. And I have had contact with opponents of the recommendation for approval of revocation for SP-2018-54. Commissioner Kane?
Contacts proponents and opponents of SP 2018-54.
All right, seeing none other?
I will now read the items on consent agenda. Changes on application item 13183 match slit. Changes on from RP1 Planned Single Family District to R1 Single Family District for continuation of the residential development at 4401 North 115th Street, recommended for approval. Item 2, 3184 Peter and Lisa Lord with Warehouse 647 LLC. Changes zone from M2 General District, Industrial District to CP3 Planned Commercial District for a residential unit over a commercial business at 647 Southwest Boulevard, recommended for approval. Item 3, 3185 Brandon Becker with BCB Holds. Changes zone AG Agricultural District to R1 Single Family District for a single-family residential development at 3316 North 131st Street, recommended for approval. Item 4, 3186 Kirk Winters with UG Water Pollution Control. Change of zone from AZ Agricultural District to MP3 Plant Heavy Industrial District for a wastewater treatment plant at 9407 Main Street, recommended for approval. Special use permit applications, item 1, SP 2019-16, Jeffrey E. Hollenshed, special use permit for live entertainment in conjunction with the coffee shop at 2005 North 5th Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 2, SP 2019-19, Dana and Patty Meir, renew of a special use permit for an Airbnb at 3910 Springfield, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 3, SP 2019-26, Michael Gayakis, special use permit for an Airbnb at 2716 North 119th Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 4, SP 2019-27, Rich Eckert, with Bettis Asphalt and Construction, special use permit for a temporary asphalt plant at 1625 South 86th Street, recommended for approval for 100 days. Item 5, SP 2019-28, Jeffrey Steinberg with Apex CPL Institute. Renewal of special use permit for a commercial driver's license training facility and job placement program for graduating students at 6801 State Avenue, recommended for approval for 5 years. Item 6, SP 2019-32, Keith Orr. Renewal of a special use permit to keep 2 horses at 1715 South 94th Street, recommended for denial. Item 5, SP 2019-33, Ancoli Chantar Moncol with ABC Properties, special use permit for a special term rental at 2310 West 41st Street Avenue, recommended for approval for 1 year. Item 8, SP 2019-34, Jessica Zieg with RZ Properties LLC, is a renewal of a special use permit for an Airbnb at 625 Northrop Avenue, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 9, 2019-37, Yola Van Lane, renewal of a special use permit for an Airbnb at 4440 Cambridge Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Vacation application, we have one, is UE 2019-2, Andrea Wiseout with Atlas Surveyors. Vacation of a utility easement at 5443 North 101st Terrace, recommended for approval. Plan review application, one item, PR 2019-6, Petty Hardy with TW McCone LLC. Preliminary and final plan review for tidal wave car wash at 10760 Parallel Parkway, recommended for approval. Master plan amendment, item 1, MP Kurt Winters with UG Water Pollution Control. Master plan amendment from regional commercial to utilities at 9407 Main Street, recommended for approval. Miscellaneous ordinances as follow. Item 1 is an ordinance rezoning property at 9731 and 9745 Leavenworth Road from AG Agricultural District to R1 Single Family District, recommended for approval. Item 2 is an ordinance rezoning property at 1620 South 45th Street, Industrial District, MP3 Plant Heavy District, recommended for approval. Item 3 is an ordinance rezoning property at 732 North 57th Street from R1 Single Family District to AG Agricultural District, recommended for approval. Item 4 is an ordinance regarding vending machines and exterior sale and modifying the regulations thereof, amending sections 27-340 and 276126 to Chapter 27, Article 8 of 2008 Code of Ordinances and Resolutions of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, recommended for approval. The final ordinance is item number 5, is rezoning property at 500 North 86th Street from R1 Single Family District to AG Agriculture District, recommended for approval. Those are all items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the planning and zoning consent agenda will be voted on by one vote to follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner McGee, did you?
Yeah, I'd just like to set aside the ordinance on vending machines.
Okay, so that is, okay. Number 19714.
Move for approval for all remaining items.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Roll call, Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0, that motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to the set-aside item, which is number 4, miscellaneous ordinances, an ordinance regarding vending machines and exterior sales and modifying the regulations thereof. Mr. Richardson?
Mr. Mayor, this ordinance was before the commission, I believe last month. We had the report on the ordinance at that time. This is just the final action, adopting the final version of the ordinance.
So Mayor, I just have one question.
Thank you.
So the very last part of the ordinance, I believe it is, it's number 13, B. It says exterior sales and vending machines are not permitted in the official commercial overlay zone area west of 94th Street and then it says, or on new projects in planned districts. What, can you explain what a planned district would be?
Yes, Commissioner, the plan districts are the zoning that says like CP or CP1 or CP2 or MP1 or MP2, where that plan review would go before the Board of, the preliminary would go before the Board of Commissioners and Planning Commission. The final plan would be approved by the Planning Commission, and the issues related to this should be shown on the site plan so they could be resolved at that time in the official capacity as they move forward and not after the fact, so to speak.
So if a project is going to plan to have vending machines on the exterior of their building, it can be addressed at the initial planning stages? Should be addressed then? They can't be added at a later date?
Correct. They could, but through the plan review process, just like any site plan. We don't allow significant changes to architecture or the site plan without going back through the official process. So they could come back through the process again and then do that.
Okay. I just don't want to be in the same, we just had this, the only reason I bring this up, Rob, is I actually sat in for another commissioner at a standing committee on Monday, and I'll bring the subject up again. At least the parks I can speak for on behalf of in my district have no water source. There are no drinking fountains in my particular area. And one of the things that our government has tried to encourage is more activity with people, taking walks, enjoying our parks, getting out. One of the things that's difficult is if you're, based on the number of emails I received about pets and dogs lately, I think we have a number of pet lovers in our community, that if you're out walking your dog and there is not a drinking fountain available at a public park or in a public space, then you're left to go to a vending machine since you can't take an animal in a store with you. And so my concern is, and I just happen to know because I live in an urban neighborhood, that if I'm walking my dog, I can go up to a vending machine and get something to drink as opposed to having to go home or carry something with me. So I just want to make sure that this ordinance doesn't impede if there is another retail development and they want to be able to put drinking vending machines on the outside of the building, that in a neighborhood that's very walkable like my district or in a lot of other urban neighborhoods, that people have access to water or whatever else that they choose to drink.
Commissioner, I think that I might recommend that you request this be held over for a month so I can answer those questions specifically. I don't want to do it on the fly tonight and run into a problem later.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd just make a motion, so we don't have to belabor it. I'd just make a motion that we hold this over for a month.
We do have to have public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in support? Seeing none, anyone like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call: Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley. Walters. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have two items under the Planning and Zoning non-consent agenda. First item, number one, is special use permit application SP-2019-30, Angela Turner with Simmons Security and Protection Services for office space for a private security guard company at 428 North Fifth Street. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 to approve for 1 year. I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This case does come to you recommended for approval. The request is to use the lower unit of a up and down duplex as an office for Simmons Security. The neighborhood group that has expressed opposition to this proposal, Mrs. Simmons is here to talk more in depth about the case.
Okay, Ms. Simmons, please give us your name and your address, city of residency.
Actually, my name is Angela Turner.
Oh, Angela, I'm sorry.
4110 North 112th Street. I'm also the owner of 428 North 5th Street. Simmons Security has applied for a special use permit in order to operate our administrative office in the first floor unit at 428 North 5th Street. My husband and I have owned the property since 1999 and work hard to be good neighbors. Simmons Security has been in business since 2007. We'd like to maintain an office in downtown KCK. I'm the only employee that will be at the office on a regular basis. All of our other employees report directly to their post location. We're not open to the public. We do not sell any products or services directly to the public. We would occasionally use the office space to conduct interviews and/or orientation for prospective employees, requiring 2 to 3 people to be in the office at that time. We would operate our office during office hours Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We plan on parking in the back space behind the property. Downtown KCK is important to us. One of our main focuses is to help deter crime and improve the culture in downtown. We're excited about the economic growth and revitalization occurring in downtown, but with growth comes challenges for local small businesses. Simmons Security is proud to have operated our business in KCK for the past 11 years. Currently, 89% of our employees are KCK residents, with 32% of those people living in downtown. We're proud to provide our community with quality security services while also providing KCK residents with employment opportunities that pay above minimum wage. According to the authors of Building Equitable City, there is much cities can do to create systems and support for the growth of small businesses. My opponents talk about gentrification. Gentrification affects homeowners and small businesses in areas where there's an increase in population and amenities due to economic growth. According to governing.com, the leading causes in increased rental rates in urban areas are revitalization of neighborhoods and the increase of Airbnbs in those neighborhoods. A study by Urban Economics that was published in December of 2018 shows that Airbnbs that are located in revitalized urban areas have contributed to a 12% increase in rental rates and house prices in the past 4 years. Areas not affected by gentrification typically see a rental increase of 3 to 5% over that same time period. Reduction in affordable housing units, additional traffic, crime, and excessive use of public services are also associated with short-term units. Illegal operated Airbnbs have even a greater impact on rental rates and crime. Currently, short-term rental rates in Strawberry Hill are listed for an average of $1,500 per month for a studio apartment. However, my opponents are not opposing these special use permits, and one was just accepted tonight. The addition of our office in Strawberry Hill will continue to support a local small business that is providing jobs for the community. Our office will not provide any additional amenities to the residents and may have gone unnoticed if we had not been so committed to following the law. I have spoken to several of the neighbor property owners, both commercial and residential, who are in support of this special use permit and look forward to having a security company located in their area. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you. Have a seat. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor?
Abraham Santana, 1664 Holt Lane, Kansas City, Kansas. I just want to show my support. Been with the small family-owned company for 10 years now, and I want to continue for another 10, 20 years. No.
Thank you, sir.
G'day, Will Anderson. I'm the Vice President of BHC Roads, the local company. I'm also the Chair of the Downtown Shareholders. Simmons Security have been doing a wonderful job for the area, and that's largely because of the people. So I'm here to support them as people, as a business, to operate it in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else present like to speak in support? Seeing none, anyone present in opposition who would like to speak? Please state your name, and you have 3 minutes, and your city of residence.
Justine Underwood Jones, Kansas City, Kansas. I am the president of the Strawberry Hill Neighborhood Association. First, I would just like to say we have never been in favor of any Airbnb special use permit. So we have not gone out and fought them. We wait for neighbors to contact us and let us know if they have issues with them. And if they do, then we will oppose them, and we do reserve that capacity. But we have never been in favor of an Airbnb. So I just want to clarify that neutral is not the same as being in favor. Our board is split on those issues. We are in opposition of this special use permit, not because we have any concerns that Simmons Security would be a bad neighbor on Fifth Street, not because of the way that she's taken care of the property, no parking or noise concerns, but because of the precedent that this would set for the future of Strawberry Hill, and in particular North Fifth Street, which is not in this mid-district. This street is viewed by many as a great candidate for profitable redevelopment. The street's location and its southern end's access to I-70, especially with the Merck and KU Med coming to Strawberry Hill, make it appealing to developers who see it as a potential all-commercial street, despite the current prevalence of residential properties. If Simmons Security is allowed to use it as an office, it will be obvious due to the nature of the structure that a residential unit has been repurposed into an office, and this will send a message to future developers that they too can repurpose less expensive residential real estate into more lucrative office space. The burden will then fall on the Strawberry Hill Neighborhood Association to combat future special use permit requests and variance requests as they come up. This is a burden for our organization. We're told that this isn't an issue because this license is temporary, but the applicant has not put forth any plan to the UG or to our neighborhood group for financing a more permanent office that is zoned as such. She's not laid out any plan to increase her office budget over the next year or set out a date when she intends to remove her office from the residence. We anticipate that this will be renewed repeatedly until a variance request is ultimately submitted or until lengthier special use permits make it effectively permanent. Approval of this application will send one of two messages. Either every business that is priced out of their office can repurpose a residence for office space, providing relief from gentrification and displacement for area businesses, but not for residents, or only businesses that are connected to downtown shareholders are eligible for this relief. Either message is harmful for our community. We do appreciate the work they've done downtown, and we understand downtown shareholders' desire to help their contractor. What we propose is that they offer the use of the trailer that they are building on 6th Street once it's installed, as the intended use of the trailer is to serve as temporary commercial space for businesses that cannot otherwise afford it. Thank you.
Anyone else present like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Would the petitioner like to make any closing comments? Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion for approval.
We have a motion for approval and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call: Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have the recommendation from the Planning Commission to revoke special use permit application SP-2018-54, R. Scott Beeler, for the temporary use of land for storage of motor vehicles, including cars, SUVs, pickup trucks, and semi-truck trailers at 9700 Leavenworth Road. I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, it is actually from the staff, not from the Planning Commission. This item has not been to the Planning Commission. The way the code is set up, the revocation hearing comes to the body of action, and so that is this body. I received complaints from citizens several months ago about the routes the trucks were using and the use of Jake brakes and things. I contacted the applicant, Mr. Beeler, about that. Those were primarily addressed. But then we've had recent issues with a large number of vehicles not being driven to the site on the trucks, as was approved by the special use permit. There was one case of damage to an adjacent property owner. I was receiving comments from a couple of commissioners and the mayor's office, and I thought that the best way to resolve this was to bring it to the public body for a discussion about this permit and whether or not it should continue. Mr. Beeler, the applicant, is here this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Beeler, if you'd come forward to present your application, please state your name and your city of residency.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. R. Scott Beeler, B-E-E-L-E-R, Lathrop Gage, LLP, 10851 Maston, Overland Park, Kansas. Pleased to be here tonight. in representation of my longtime client, the Woodlands. Jamie LaRocca, who is our property manager, is also present. Mr. Mayor, you indicated to present my application. Actually, I'm here just to respond to the comments of the staff. I'll begin by simply saying that this is a valued special use permit by the Woodlands. It has been used and operated since it was granted in May of 2018, so it extends to May of 2020. The revocation of a special use permit that grants a property right or a property use is an extreme remedy under the law. It's extreme because obviously the taking or the revocation of that permit is, in fact, a taking of a property right. And as I mentioned, this is a property right that exists for a minimum of 2 years and is subject to being renewed after that period of time. It's a very valuable asset to the Woodlands. And as such, the holder of the permit, the Woodlands, and Ruffin Woodlands, the owner, is very sensitive, obviously, to this proceeding and being brought here on a revocation by staff or otherwise. But we're here to hopefully allay any fears that, and alleviate any existing fears that may exist with regard to this operation. But in doing that, I think we have to understand what it is we're even here for, if you will. When I made the application for this permit, I advised that the intent of the Woodlands was to store motor vehicles on its empty parking lots while we were continuing in our efforts to resume gaming at the facility. The concerns, both at the public meeting that I attended and presented at the Planning Commission and then again here before this body, were really limited. They were limited to how much truck traffic are you going to have, how much noise are you going to create, and how are you going to enter and exit the property. You may recall there were some concerns that we would use the 99th Street entrance as the primary location to enter the property for storage, and we agreed that we would not do that due to the fact that there are 4 or 5 homeowners that are between the intersection of Leavenworth and 99th to that entry, and then an additional some teens of homes that go north of that, but of course the trucks wouldn't go beyond the entry point. There are also 5 total homes that exist between the main driveway off of Leavenworth Road and working back over to 99th Street. Several of those sit a long ways back from Leavenworth, but several of them are quite close to Leavenworth. And we agreed that we would use that entrance, and staff asked us to do that, and that we would stipulate to using the main entrance as our access point. The packet that you all have before you lists the actual stipulations that were attached to this application and to the permit itself once issued. And those effectively are not being challenged here in this revocation proceeding. There is in the packet reference to compliance with stipulations 2, 3, 4, and 5, but subsequently the statement in the packet, which is correct, is that there are no remaining issues, nor have there really been any extensive issues with 2, 3, and 4. That leaves 5 among the stipulations. And I'll go through those real quick. We were supposed to have appropriate direct lighting, we do. No use of jack brakes. Let's ask ourselves, why do we have that stipulation? And the answer is because the anticipation was that these vehicles were going to be delivered on semi-truck trailer over-the-road haulers with 7 cars per trailer. And they didn't want those big jack brakes when those trucks were working. We agreed to that stipulation, and there have been no reported violations. That the vehicles would only use Leavenworth Road. I have to admit that in the very early stages of this operation, a few of the truck drivers missed that instruction and did go over to the 99th Street exit to the point where Mr. LaRocca stationed himself there, in addition to the security that we have at the main entrance, to make sure that that process was stopped, and it was, and that's all the way back last fall. There have been no violations since that time, and here we are almost to May of 2019. That, of course, incorporates number 4, that the vehicles will not use 99th Street. There was, in fact, a complaint at one period of time, and this gets to part of my presentation. The complaint was that vehicles, trucks, may be staging at the entrance of 99th by parking there overnight and waiting for the 7:30 a.m. And there was a report that there was such a truck. We immediately investigated that, as we have every complaint, and determined, in fact, ended up emailing the letter from the actual owner of that truck, who is not associated with the Woodlands whatsoever, but actually lives right there in the area and was driving home from an over-the-road trip and had a breakdown of his own truck. And he moved the physical cones that we put out to keep people from accessing there and parked his truck till the next morning so it would not be on the roadway. I bring that up because there have been a number of those types of complaints over time. There was another one where a vehicle was parked at the end of our main entrance with its light shining directly to the south into a homeowner that is actually here this evening in the middle of the night. And they actually complained not only to us, but filed a report with the police, who investigated, and it was ultimately determined that that too was not associated with the Woodlands, and rather a member of the public who happened to just pull over there and for whatever reason talk on the phone or do whatever they did. They just sat there for a very long period until they were ushered away. But again, we investigated that one as well as we did that truck parking overnight and every one that has occurred since that time. And we have essentially had a 100% compliance on all of those items since then. There is also a reference to a special use permit being for passenger cars, pickups, and small passenger vans. That too we have complied with. There have been no objections otherwise, and the remainder of the stipulations the same. Again, that takes us back to the fifth one. And in actuality, folks, the permit, when it was ultimately issued and sent out in writing to the applicant, says absolutely nothing about how vehicles arrive at the facility, except in the way of a restriction. That restriction being, if you bring those vehicles by virtue of a semi-truck trailer, you are limited to 60 of those a day. Obviously, a truck comes there and a truck leaves. That's one truck. 60 of those a day, as I said, 7 cars on each one of those, and no more than 17 in an hour. Now, easy math is that means that truck is bringing in or taking out 420 vehicles. You multiply that out over time, you have 1,800 trucks coming there per month allowed under this permit and this property right. Over 3 months, that's 5,400. Over 6 months, that's 10,600, and so on. And we're up to 8 months into this now. Those are allowed trips pursuant to contract right. What we did not know was that over the course of the life of this permit, due to the Ford, who we had actually contracted with, and its carriers deciding that there were cheaper ways of bringing the vehicles the 8 to 10 miles that they needed to come, they began to drive some of those vehicles by individual drivers. I drive a pickup truck, it's sitting out in the parking lot, just like that truck that any of you might have, coming to work, coming to home to lunch, going home from dinner. They just drove them in there, parked them, and that's it. That reduced the number of our semi-truck trailer trips significantly. The driving of the vehicles was averaging 250 cars a day on average. Leavenworth Road, that sits out in front of the 5 houses there, is designed to handle 40,000 trips a day. We were driving 250 cars. Now, it came up that, well, you didn't tell us that you were going to drive a car to the facility. Well, two things. One, I didn't know that was going to happen, neither did Mr. LaRocca, who's here tonight, and I don't believe they did either. That wasn't their intent at the time. I think cost came into the picture, and they were upset with some of those drivers that had violated the stipulations early on, and they found this to be a more reliable way of doing it. But the second is I never would have dreamed to say it anyway. We're just talking about driving down the street in a passenger car, a passenger vehicle, and parking it. 250 of them at that over that type of an arterial. But the bottom line is they were driving cars in. That left just one thing. And if you look at the permit, it says nothing about time constraints on it. But I'm not here to say that that's not applicable. I said and stood before this body and the Planning Commission and the public in the public meeting before that and said we would restrict those truck trips to the 7:30 to 7:30 p.m. time to avoid the noise concerns that people would have, just like that jack brake reference is. And we've done that. We restricted those trucks to those time periods. Were there, out of the thousands of truck trips that have occurred during that time, were there a handful where they arrived 10 minutes or 30 minutes early and were turned away? The answer is yes. But they were each time reported and taken care of by immediate reports to Ford and the carrier to say that cannot continue or happen, and it has not. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a report of that for months. So when I began discussions with Mr. Richardson, who was listening to the populace as he should, he said, well, regardless of whether you're driving them or whatever, we're concerned that because cars are going in and out of there after 7:30, or passenger vehicles, and they were, because the permit did not restrict those types of trips to any time period. The only discussion was the trucks between 7:30 and 7:30. And for lack of any other way of putting it, let's call that a change in circumstance or misunderstanding, whatever it was. But what I did was, not that I tried to say, by golly, my permit, black and white, does not have that restriction, you cannot do that. I didn't do that. I went back to my client first and said, we've got a problem, that this is going in a direction that I don't think any of us intended, and I'm not sure it should substantively matter, but it does matter to the unified government. Would it be okay if I went back under the contract to Ford and our carrier and say, and I need to add this, our contract originally said just trucks. You can drive anytime you want, because we weren't restricted. But I went back to them and said, would you agree? Actually, I put it a little differently. I said, we will not agree to extend your contract for another month unless you agree to limit all of your traffic 7:30 to 7:30, no matter how you get them in there. Drive them or truck them. And they need us. And they said, okay. And I have produced that change in the contracts now signed by both parties. So there is no 7:30 to 7:30 issue anymore. That is an agreed stipulation, not only for trucks, but drive them, fly them, I don't care how they come in. We said, you have to live by that time period. And they've agreed. So what's left? I would submit to you nothing. We have really, really tried to work hard here with the city in every respect, whether it's a single complaint or it's a multitude of them, which there are no multitudes. We had an incident where a truck driver made a wrong turn and drove into a driveway thinking he was turning on a street, and he did some damage to Ms. Bruner's yard. Mr. LaRocca was there before she was even able to type out her complaint, and we not only fixed but paid for the damage to her yard and assessed that right on down the line, as you might guess, to fix that immediately. She had her new repairs within the week. We take the public's complaints seriously, and we act on them in a very timely and efficient manner. So here's the new news. Well, a couple things. One, I happened to notice on one of the documents for the packet tonight that our property is listed as having taxes in arrears. That is not true. I have sent to the mayor's office, in fact, copies of the tax invoice that my client received on the 25th of March, showing that the payment of $151,000 that was due in December for the first payment of 18 was in fact made. And that very invoice reflects a due amount of $151,000 and change by the second payment date required, stated right on the notice of May 10. So we're right in compliance. All our taxes are on time, and that payment will be made on time as well. So I respectfully submit that's an error in that statement. But the new news is, this is, and you may recall me talking about this, this is only here because the rail system can't keep up with the plant. The plant pushes out more cars than there are rail cars to get these vehicles where they're sold to dealers, not to you or me, the end user, but to a dealer. So they have to sit somewhere till there's a rail car to put them on to get them to their end destination. When the plant shuts down, as they do for various holidays and summer, and they shut for a period of time. So obviously the production slows, the supply catches up, the vehicles get on the trains, and they're gone. As of today, there's not one vehicle on the Woodlands other than the security folks, because that process is happening as we get to the summer months. They have advised us they'll be back in August or early September, but right now we got a quiet place. When they come back, I would expect all of these stipulations to be in place. I will tell you that I expect some semi-truck traffic as they bring them. We don't control that. We've limited them to the 60 as our permit does, but they may drive some of them if it suits them. I can't imagine that any of us would object to that. It's quieter, more efficient, and certainly wouldn't cause any issue for any neighbor, especially because they've also had to agree to the 7:30 to 7:30 timeframe. So they can't drive a car out in the middle of the night, by example. The one thing I've left out, and it reminds me since I see the badge on the officer, there were some complaints that the vehicles were not properly or legally tagged as they were being driven. That is incorrect. All of us jumped on that, did investigations, including calls made to the Highway Patrol and to the local law enforcement, who all said you can properly transit a vehicle like that. They simply have to have the required transit paperwork. And we passed that along, certainly to these folks. And then one day, out of the blue, I get a call that there has been a mass stop of these vehicles as they left the Woodlands out along Leavenworth Road. And I thought to myself, why in the world would that be the case? Multiple police officers stopping a grouping of 20 to 25 individually driven vehicles. Kind of troublesome, but I said, okay, how did it come out? No tickets, all being transported legally. We have since, and since that time, there was a police presence rather regularly out in front of the Woodlands, and other stops made, just not in quite the same manner of the multi-car stops. I'm advised, and in fact, staff report I noted confirms what I had been told, and that is there was a single vehicle out of all these vehicles that have come and gone where the driver had not properly displayed his transit paperwork. And I don't know if that was a warning or a ticket, but one incident, one. But the staff report says things like they had to go out there and that we ceased operations when we saw police officers. With all due respect, those kinds of allegations don't help anything. That's not true. It was business as usual. I don't know why the police came in the first place, especially since it had been determined that these vehicles were properly there. But it caused trouble for Ford, and it caused trouble for the transit company. And I hope that we don't continue to see that. But the bottom line is, despite the fact that there are references to that in this revocation proceeding, this very important proceeding that is very serious and extreme remedy, there are statements there that will lead a person reading the packet to believe that there may be legal violations in terms of the paperwork and the vehicles. That is not true. They're being transited legally. So I've taken enough of your time. We do take this very seriously. We would respectfully request that your vote be to not take any action with regard to this permit and allow it to continue on as previously granted. And as I indicated, the stipulation with regard to 7:30 to 7:30, which I've already shown by way of the contract change, can be modified as necessary to indicate that that pertains not only to trucked vehicles or delivered vehicles, but also to driven. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and we'd be happy to stand for your questions.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing. Ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak in favor of special use permit SP 2018-54. If so, please step to the podium at this time and give us your name and address for the record. So again, this is in support of continuing
Right.
the special use permit.
My name is Joy Gardner. My house is 9625 Leavenworth Road, and my driveway is directly across the street from the 95th Street entrance to the Woodlands. I initially was coming here to complain. I got to talk to Jamie and Mr. Beeler, and now that they're going more to the 7:30 and not 2:30 in the morning and things like that, because whenever a truck or one of the vans would come out of the Woodlands, the headlights, which were blinking, would come right in my bedroom window. And I have two great big dogs. If it didn't wake me up, it woke them up, and they woke me up. It also went into my son's bedroom window, which is on the north side of the house. It is not my intent to close the facility. They're working to try to get it open again. I used to work at the Woodlands when it was open. And I think we can get this worked out as far as the lights coming in. The trucks aren't, there's not as many trucks. Like I said, my biggest complaint now, since it's slowed down so much especially, is the lights in my window, because they flashed their lights, but it was late at night, sometimes as late as 2 or 3 in the morning. If they're going to do the 7:30 to 7:30, I can deal with that.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else who would like to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone present who'd like to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Lori Torres. I live at 9828 Donahue Road. I want to speak in opposition of this. I have a little timetable here going. On February 21st, I emailed Byron Toy and Zach Flanders regarding a semi-truck parked at 99th Street entrance. Operation hours from 7:30 to 7:30, and 24 vehicles being on the road with no license plates, okay? My mail was then forwarded to Mr. Beeler. Mr. Beeler's response was the semi parked in the entrance was a neighbor's semi. Okay, I'll deal with that. But the Woodlands is still responsible for what happens on their land. They're responsible for that. Mr. Beeler stated the licenses, permits, or plates are not part of this SUP. That was in his letter. The Woodlands did not care how the cars were delivered there, with no license plate, whatever. It's a contract company. They go down to 51st and Kansas Avenue, get the cars off of BNSF Railway. They drive them no tags, all the way out to 97th and Leavenworth Road. This has gone on for months and months and months. On March 11th, 8:09, 29 box vans pulling into the Woodlands with no license plate. 8:28 p.m., 12 more box vans pulling in with no license plates. March 13th, 38 box vans pulling in with no license plates. 17 more at 10:14, no license plates. I'm worried about the 16-year-olds that just got their driver's license, the elderly that are driving around out there, and you've got 250 vehicles coming a day with no license plates on them. We do not know if they have.
You have 1 minute, ma'am.
Oh, man, that's a bummer. Anyway, I don't want this to go. On March 26th, the police stopped the vans because they did not have license plates. Currently, they were driving with license plates. They're Kentucky plates, though. Kentucky plates are only good from point A in Kentucky to point B in Kentucky. They're not good in Kansas. Okay? Pardon me? Let me see what else. On March 26th, yeah, all the white vans got stopped there because they didn't have any license plates. Now, there is such thing as the Kansas drive-away plate. You do have to go to Topeka, Kansas. In the 13 years I worked for auto license, never did I sell a drive-away Kansas permit. You can buy 60-day, you can buy 30-day, not a drive-away plate. They're using
Your
Kentucky.
time is up, ma'am. Thank you.
And they're no good in Kansas.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, would the applicant like to make any final closing comment?
No, sir, we appreciate it.
All right. So I want to be clear that the plates, there are papers that allow these vehicles to be driven legally?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you. It's nice to see Mrs. Gardner. She was one of the residents in the area that had contacted me about the hours of operation. I've heard from 5 different homeowners in the area. So even if there's only 5 on Leavenworth Road or 10 total, I've heard from 50%. So to me, 50% of a densely populated area versus 50% of a less densely populated area is still half the neighbors. And so I have to pay attention to that, and I have to try to work with what could be a solution for when I'm hearing from half the neighborhood. I want to thank Mr. LaRocca because it was made clear that when the damage was done to the lady's property, that it was immediately corrected. And we do appreciate that. Everybody appreciates that. I understand that you're saying, Mr. Bueller, that the permit itself did not specify hours of operation. That's what I think I heard you say tonight.
It did not, but we have adhered to that for the truck.
Agreed to comply to those hours.
Yes. And now changed it one more step.
Okay.
Beyond trucks to cars too.
And I appreciate that too. So I think I hear that you want to comply.
Absolutely. I'm not asking to not comply.
My concern is that we all have a document that we've all agreed to in public, in writing.
Sure.
And we don't have that right now. My understanding is we don't have such a document right now.
Well, we have a document. I am saying it probably ought to be modified.
And I would agree
To
that it
include
needs
that.
to be modified. I would think modification of the current document might be the solution. So to me, if I'm seeking a legal remedy, then I would have to turn to Rob or our legal to ask the best way to attain that legal remedy. And the remedy I seek, which is a document in writing that we've all agreed to here in a public setting, I'm guessing might be for this to go back to our planning board. I don't know that answer.
Well, I don't know if you're asking.
I'm actually would be asking Rob or our legal counsel. Thank you.
Well, since this is a revocation hearing, the commission can take direct action, but your action should be based on a violation of one of the conditions of the special use permit. It seems to me, and 90% of what I know is what I've heard here today, is that when the special use permit was initially granted, it was granted with the understanding, I think everyone had, that these vehicles, these cars would be delivered there by semi-truck, and so those conditions were geared towards that type of delivery. It didn't prevent vehicles being delivered by, driven there, but again, it wasn't contemplated either. So I think it could be sent back to the Planning Commission to develop, if there's any additional modifications of special use permit, to accommodate the additional facts or the true facts of how the operation is being handled.
So to that point, I'd entertain a motion. We could approve the Planning Commission's recommendation to revoke. We could deny the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve the special use permit. We can also refer back to the Planning Commission.
So question, we refer back to Planning Commission. We haven't revoked.
No.
We've referred the revocation back to planning.
I believe we can give them directions to add stipulations that more clearly spell out the mode of delivery, the limitations on those things, and what the remedies might be.
Motion to return this item to the Planning Commission with the direction to more specifically delineate in the agreement what the stipulations will be.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
May I have a clarification?
Roll call,
Roll call.
Johnson.
Wait.
May I have a clarification, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. When it goes back to the Planning Commission and to clarify the stipulations, I understand that we need to clarify the stipulation for 730 to 730 involves all vehicles. I have not heard anyone tonight say anything negative about the fact that a vehicle that makes no noise is going into the facility over a trucked one,
Well,
including
sir.
these folks. So I want to know, are you asking the Planning Commission to look at that? Because they, under the law, they are to receive specific instructions from the board as to what they are to look at. So my clarification is, I heard about the 730 to 730 in the commissioner's question. I did not hear about any other issues, and I want to be sure they're not confused.
I think
Mr. B is correct, is that this isn't really to reopen the entire special use permit because unless there's been a finding that certain areas have been violated, that'd be grounds for revocation. I think the issue is, and the question really is that the use is somewhat different than originally contemplated, and so applying those conditions to that other use or that extended use would be really the question. I think it's probably limited to should there be any other conditions because the vehicle's driven in by, the car's being driven directly.
so. The motion should include a direction for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider whether additional stipulations ought to be added to regulate the delivery by single individuals.
Really, I think that should all these conditions apply to that,
Okay.
the ones previously granted, previously imposed.
Yes, sir. Yes, Rob.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, this special use permit is for the industrial use of the property for industrial storage. And so I think the delivery, when we assumed that this was going to be delivered by trucks, cars were not contemplated. And I think that if it's sent back, the Planning Commission should open that part of the hearing up because we haven't had public comment on that part of how they're delivered. And that would relate to, if that's appropriate, then all of these stipulations, should those stipulations or others apply to that method of delivery, or are there other ones that would be more appropriate? Because this was never, there was a neighborhood meeting, there was a Planning Commission meeting, there was a Board of Commissioners meeting. Never were the words, we're going to drive 250 cars a day to the site uttered. And so I think that's a material part of this case that ought to be discussed in public, and just make sure that if these are the stipulations, they're the right ones, and there might be other ones that would be more appropriate.
So, Mr. Moore, based upon your previous comments, we're not reopening the entire special use permit. What direction needs to be given to the Planning and Zoning Commission if we want to look at the delivery of single vehicles?
I think the planning commission should, again, it's not reopening everything, it's just looking at what has changed that was not initially contemplated, and if there should be any conditions relative to that change.
Okay. Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. You had stated the permit says absolutely nothing except the restriction speaking to how the vehicles come in. That's what
No,
you stated
except
earlier.
limiting the number of semi-truck trips per day to 60.
Correct. But this is almost a verbatim quote of what you said, that the permit says absolutely nothing except the restriction speaking to how the vehicles come in by semi-truck.
By
So my
semi-truck.
question is, do I need to amend my motion because we want clarification around how the vehicles will be transported in and clarification around the hours of operation? And again, what I seek is a stated in public agreement between the petitioner and the unified government as to what the stipulations will be. And if we need to clarify on those two items, that's fine with me.
I'm happy to make that stipulation tonight if you care.
I think it's probably, I think it's appropriate to go back to planning and zoning with the additional
Motion
language.
And a motion in a second.
Do we need to modify the motion?
Should I modify my motion? So the motion will be that we return to planning and zoning for clarification around two items within the special use permit. One speaking to how vehicles will be delivered into the location and codifying the hours of operation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley. Walters.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Lugia.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board.
That concludes the planning and zoning portion of tonight's meeting. We'll now move to the regular portion of our agenda. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the regular consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the regular consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley. Walters.
Aye.
Bynum.
You're not done yet. Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Now we move to the administrator's agenda. Mr. Bach?
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on this is for the resolution whereby we're asking that any monies we expend toward the KC Betterment project on the levies be allowed for reimbursement back through any notes that we may issue or bonds we may issue later on.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
Move to approve as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Bynum seconded. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley. Walters.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0. That motion carried.
Our last item is a resolution regarding Operation Greenlight. Mr. Bach, make some opening remarks.
Mayor, Operation Greenlight is a program within the Mid-America Regional Council that crosses over multiple jurisdictions to encourage different governments to move forward and have timing in their lighting system. This resolution does commit us to move forward with money in our budget to pay for our share of that by pay for our systems changes. Lydiana LeBoy, our traffic engineer, is here if you would like to have her make presentation and additional comments on this. Ms. LeBoy?
No.
Or you can approve.
Or we can approve.
Move for second.
It's not that we don't like you. We have a motion and a second. We have a question.
Does this, thank you, Mayor, does this agreement include red light cameras in any way?
No, this is just synchronization, I believe.
Just want to ensure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley. Walters. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mayor.
Watching. Remember, you can view meeting agendas and minutes online at wicokck.org. Or, to confirm meeting dates and times, you can also call the Unified Government Clerk's Office at 913-573-5260.